Hey there! Today, we're going to explore the ideas of an influential guy from the past named Cesare Bonesana di Beccaria. Don't worry if you've never heard of him before. He was an Italian philosopher and thinker who lived way back in the 18th century. He wrote an essay called On Crimes and Punishments, and his ideas had a big impact on how we think about justice and punishment today. So, let's dive into Beccaria's world of thoughts. He believed that the main goal of punishment should be to deter people from committing crimes. You know, like when your parents ground you for breaking curfew, they hope you won't do it again. Beccaria was all about that idea, but he took it a step further and said that punishment should fit the crime and shouldn't be overly harsh. He thought that everyone should be equal under the law, no matter if you're rich or poor. That's a pretty cool idea, right? It means that the punishment for stealing a candy bar shouldn't be way worse just because the person is poor. Beccaria believed in fairness and reason when it came to justice. Oh, and get this, Beccaria was not a fan of torture and cruel punishments. He argued that using pain and suffering as a way to make people obey the law wasn't effective. Instead, he believed that people should know the consequences of their actions and that those consequences should be reasonable. Here's another concept he introduced, the idea of speedy trials. He wanted the justice system to work efficiently and not drag on for years. Imagine waiting forever for a decision. That's not fair to anyone involved. Beccaria wanted people to get a fair and quick trial so they could move on with their lives, whether they were guilty or innocent. You know how sometimes laws can be confusing and vague? Beccaria pointed out that laws should be clear and straightforward so that everyone knows what's right and wrong. This way, people won't accidentally break the law just because they didn't understand it. Makes sense, right? Beccaria's ideas were pretty revolutionary for his time. He challenged the harsh and unfair practices of the legal system and pushed for a more rational and humane approach to punishment. His writings sparked discussions and influenced the way people thought about justice and the role of the government. You might be wondering, did people listen to Beccaria back then? Well, yes and no. His ideas faced some resistance, as change often does, but his work eventually contributed to important reforms in the legal systems of many countries. Nowadays, we can see Beccaria's influence in the principles of modern criminal justice systems. Many countries have moved towards fairer trials, more reasonable punishments, and better protection of human rights. So, even though Beccaria lived centuries ago, his ideas still have a lasting impact on how we view crime and punishment today. Next time you hear about justice, punishment, and the law, you can remember Cesare Beccaria, the guy who dared to challenge the status quo and put forward ideas that changed the world. His message was all about fairness, reason, and humanity, and that's a message we can all connect with. One of the cool things about Beccaria's writings is that they were all about making society better. He believed that the goal of punishment wasn't just to make people suffer, but to create a safer and more harmonious community. By using reason and logic, he argued that we could achieve a society where crime was reduced, and people could live with more peace of mind. Beccaria wasn't just a dreamer, he proposed practical solutions to improve the justice system. He suggested that the punishment should be proportionate to the crime committed. So, if someone committed a minor offense, they shouldn't get a super harsh penalty. This approach would help ensure that the punishment fit the crime and wouldn't be overly cruel. Another idea Beccaria brought to the table was the importance of preventing crime in the first place. He believed that if we focused more on deterring people from committing crimes, there would be fewer lawbreakers to deal with. Instead of just reacting to crimes after they happen, he wanted to address the root causes and make society safer for everyone. Beccaria was like a pioneer in the field of criminal justice reform. His work paved the way for others who came after him to build on his ideas. And guess what? Many of those ideas are still shaping our legal systems today. We have moved towards more transparent and fair trials, and the concept of proportionate punishment is deeply ingrained in modern law. You know what's fascinating? Beccaria's writings influenced not just his own time, but also the thinkers and leaders of future generations. Some of the founding fathers of the United States were inspired by his ideas, including luminaries like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. His thoughts helped shape the principles that became the foundation of the American legal system. In many ways, Beccaria was ahead of his time. He lived during a period when cruel and unusual punishments were common, and justice was often arbitrary. But he had the courage to challenge these practices and propose a more enlightened approach. By learning about Beccaria's writings, we can understand that progress and positive change come from questioning the status quo and striving for a better society. His legacy reminds us that ordinary people, like us, can make a difference by speaking up for what we believe is right and just. So, the next time you hear about criminal justice reform or discussions on how to make the world a fairer place, you can remember Cesare Beccaria and the impact his ideas had on shaping the way we think about crime and punishment. As we continue to build a more just society, it's important to stay open to new ideas and never forget the power of reason, fairness, and compassion. Because just like Beccaria, each one of us has the potential to create a positive change in the world.